Have you ever held an old book and just felt that sense of mystery? Imagine texts from way back, rumored to contain secrets, maybe even the power to, command unseen forces.
Definitely.
Today, we're opening one just like that. A text attributed to a figure legendary, not just for being a king, but for wisdom that, stretched beyond the everyday realm. King Solomon.
Solomon's name, yeah. It's almost synonymous with profound knowledge, not just ruling kingdoms and making wise judgments, but also this connection to the divine. And maybe, based on certain traditions, even a mastery over spiritual entities.
Right.
It's a really fascinating intersection,
Yeah.
History, legend, and this deep-seated human quest for hidden power.
Absolutely. And the text we're diving into today actually claims to be his instruction manual.
Mm-hmm.
Our main source is a really significant translation of the Key Solomon the King, or Clavicula Salomonis.
Right.
It was put together by Liddell MacGregor Mathers.
Right.
And he worked meticulously from several manuscript versions, the ones housed right there in the British Museum. So it gives us this amazing window into how this text actually existed and, evolved in different forms over the centuries.
And that Mathers translation, it also comes with a foreword by Richard Cavendish. He's another scholar who is deeply versed in the history of magic.
Ah, okay.
So Cavendish provides some really crucial context. He helps ground the text, offers some modern perspectives that help us grapple with its pretty complex nature.
Yeah, because this isn't just some historical curiosity, is it? The Key of Solomon is widely considered a foundational text in, European ritual magic.
That's right.
It's presented as a practical guide, like a step-by-step manual for interacting with spiritual entities, seemingly to achieve all sorts of purposes.
It is, at its core, a system, a remarkably intricate one, actually, and quite demanding. It basically claims to give the practitioner the means to influence the world through, supernatural methods.
Okay, so our mission in this deep dive, and we're relying strictly on the material Mathers presents from these historical manuscripts, plus the commentary that comes with it, is to unpack this really dense volume.
Mm-hmm.
We want to pull out the core ideas, try to understand the complex philosophy behind it all, and explore the honestly, surprisingly intricate details of the magical practice it lays out. We're not adding our own stuff. We're just exploring what's right here in the source together with you.
Exactly. Think of this like we're stepping into an old scriptorium, maybe a hidden magical library.
Nice.
We're pulling the specific volume off the shelf, turning its pages, and carefully examining what it claims, how it instructs, and what kind of worldview it presents. And we're doing this alongside you, the listener, sort of discovering its secrets chapter by chapter, detail by detail, all through the filter of Mathers scholarship.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Let's start right at the beginning then. Where does this text claim it comes from? The title itself gives it away. King Solomon. It's presented as knowledge he passed down to his son, Rehoboam, just before his death, like a distillation of all his occult wisdom.
And that claim, that Solomonic authorship, it's absolutely central to the text's authority. It really echoes traditions that existed long, long before the medieval period when the actual Clavicula manuscripts we have likely came together.
So this wasn't just made up for the book.
No, not at all. Look at Josephus, the first century Jewish historian. He mentioned a book by Solomon containing incantations for summoning spirits. He even described how a Jew named Eleazar supposedly used one of these incantations right in front of Emperor Vespasian to expel demons.
Wow, okay. So the idea of Solomon as a master of spirits was already circulating way back then.
Precisely. And you also see it in the Testament of Solomon. That's another text that might date back as early as the first few centuries AD.
What does that one say?
Well, that text details how an angel supposedly gave Solomon a magic ring, and this ring granted him power over demons, allowing him to, question them and even compel them to help build the temple in Jerusalem. It even names and describes various demons and what they do.
So these themes divine favor, getting magical power from angels or God, controlling potentially difficult spirits, they're really baked into Solomon's legend early on.
Absolutely. The key just slots very neatly into that pre-existing narrative structure.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. When we get to the medieval period, we start seeing actual mentions of texts, like the Clavicula Salomonis, the Little Key of Solomon, and the Sigillum Salomonis, his seal.
Right. Mathers, in his preface, mentions a pamphlet from 1456 that refers to these titles. And based on the manuscripts he was looking at, Mathers came to believe that his version represented a tradition that was really solidifying around that 15th century period, though it was likely drawing on even older material that's now, unfortunately, lost to us.
That's the crucial bit, isn't it? Mathers didn't have one single original text. He was working from multiple manuscript copies.
Exactly. He based his translation mainly on 7 different codices he found in the British Museum Library. He lists them very specifically. Add MS 162, Sloan MSS 3307 and 3091, Harleian MSS 3981, King's MSS 288, and Lansdowne MSS 1202 and 1203.
That's quite a list. And he points out some really interesting differences between them, doesn't he?
He does. For instance, that 10862 Ad MSS, that's the oldest one he used, probably late 16th century. It's written in this really difficult, contracted Latin, and apparently the drawings of the pentacles, the magical diagrams, are quite crude. But it contains chapters that are actually missing in some of the other later manuscripts.
And that manuscript even has the title Clavicula Salomonis, translated from the Hebrew language into the Latin.
Right, which points directly to that tradition, although it's unverified, of a lost Hebrew original. Other manuscripts, like the ones in the Harleian or Sloan collections, they're in French or Italian. They often have much fuller, more elaborate conjurations, and sometimes really beautifully drawn pentacles, even in color.
It shows how things change over time with copying. Mathers also notes that one of the Italian manuscripts, Sloan 1307, is particularly interesting, right? Because it mixes parts of the key with stuff Mathers considered black magic.
Yes, exactly. It includes elements from other well-known grimoires, like the Grimorium Verum. It really demonstrates how these texts weren't always passed down, perfectly preserved. Copyists and compilers would add things, mix material from different sources. It wasn't static.
And Mathers himself talks about his effort to correct the Hebrew names found in the manuscripts. These names, often divine or angelic, got pretty garbled over centuries of copying, like Zenard instead of Zabath.
He really sought to restore them to what he believed were their proper forms, and he enlisted help for that, specifically from Dr. Wynne Westcott.
Another big name from that late 19th century occult scene. Co-founder of the Golden Dawn with Mathers, wasn't he?
That's the one, and this connection brings us back to Mathers himself. As Cavendish points out in the foreword, Mathers wasn't just some academic translator hidden away in a library.
No, he was a practitioner, a working magician, and a major leader in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was a hugely influential occult order at the time.
Cavendish highlights Mathers' really strong moral stance against what he termed black magic. Mathers makes this clear himself in his own notes within the key, warning against using blood, for example, which he associated with darker, more malevolent practices.
Yet Cavendish observes this tension. Despite Mathers' high-minded intentions and his condemnation of black magic, he seemed to be driven by, as Cavendish puts it, a hunger for power.
Right.
And apparently that ultimately contributed to him being removed from leadership in the Golden Dawn.
It really brings home the point that the text itself is fundamentally about acquiring and wielding power.
It does. And how that pursuit can potentially corrupt maybe even those who start out with noble goals.
It adds this layer of, human drama to the text's history. The key claims to be a key to power, and that can be a dangerous thing, both within the magical system it describes and maybe in the lives of those who actually pursue it.
Okay, so let's move from the history and the messenger, Mathers, to the message itself. What's the foundational philosophy here? Where does the Key of Solomon say this power actually comes from?
Well, the text's surprisingly clear on this point, maybe even paradoxically clear, especially for a book often associated with, summoning demons.
So?
It insists quite strongly that the magician's power ultimately derives from God. The very first chapter Mathers translates emphasizes this. It says, the beginning of our key is to fear God, to adore him, to honor him with contrition of heart, to invoke him in all matters, and to operate with very great devotion, for thus God will lead us in the right way.
Wow. Okay, that's a major insight right there. So the path to potentially commanding these animals of darkness, as the text calls them, it doesn't start with rebellion or defiance.
No.
It starts with profound piety, submission to the Almighty. It sounds like it's about channeling divine power, not trying to steal it.
Exactly. But this leads straight into a paradox that Cavendish highlights quite effectively.
Would you?
The text is filled with these incredibly fervent prayers to God, asking for divine aid, asking for permission, basically.
Yeah.
Even for operations that seem distinctly, undivine.
Like what?
Like procedures described for causing destruction, giving death, sowing hatred and discord, or even creating powders designed to provoke madness.
Yikes. How does the text possibly reconcile praying to God for those kinds of things?
It seems to suggest a worldview where God is the ultimate source of all power, both creative and destructive. The ritual then provides the mechanism, the means, to tap into that universal power and direct it towards specific ends, whether for good or for ill. The text seems to operate on a principle of what Cavendish describes as automatic magic.
Automatic magic, like you flip a switch and the light comes on, regardless of why you flipped it.
Precisely that. The idea seems to be that magical power, once you access it through the correct performance of the ritual, the prayers, the incantations, the timing, everything, it works almost automatically, regardless of the magician's momentary moral state or their specific intent at that exact second.
Okay, hold on. That's a huge takeaway.
It is.
It implies the power isn't dependent on the magician maintaining some kind of constant spiritual purity during the operation itself. It's more about the technical correctness of the ritual execution.
It seems so. The initial purity and devotion are like the prerequisites to get the ability to use the switch, maybe. But once you have that ability, flipping the switch correctly produces the result, whatever that result may be.
So how do you flip the switch? What's the mechanism?
The central mechanism, the way you tap into and direct this power, is through the use of names, particularly divine names. The text is absolutely packed with what it calls names of power.
Okay.
These are often names or epithets of God taken directly from the Old Testament. IHVH, the Tetragrammaton. ADNI, which is Adonai, meaning Lord. I am that I am. El, meaning God. Elohim, often translated as gods or God in majesty, and many, many others.
And the idea is these names aren't just labels. They contain the actual essence, the identity, the force of the divine.
That's the core belief presented here. By invoking these names correctly within the highly specific ritual context, the magician isn't just speaking words. They believe they're wielding concentrated divine authority. They're compelling spirits by the power of the ultimate being that those spirits are, in theory, subject to.
Which brings us right to those spirits. How does the key talk about them?
Well, on the surface, the text generally treats them as external beings, often described as denizens of hell or dwelling in the abyss, whom the magician summons and compels to do their will.
But is that the only way to interpret it?
Cavendish offers a more modern interpretation, one that was actually adopted by some later magical traditions influenced by psychology.
Yeah.
He suggests that the god invoked in the rituals could perhaps be seen allegorically as representing the magician's own highest potential, their true self, maybe, and the demons or animals of darkness, which is such an evocative term the key uses, aren't necessarily external entities at all.
So what are they then?
Forces residing within the magician, dwellers, as Cavendish puts it, in the infernal abyss of his own inner core.
Whoa, that completely reframes it. The external battle becomes an internal, psychological, or maybe spiritual process, confronting and integrating hidden parts of the self.
It's a fascinating possibility, isn't it? And look, regardless of whether you view them as external beings or internal forces, the key provides incredibly detailed instructions for interacting with these animals of darkness.
And those instructions are laid out pretty systematically within the book's structure, right? It's divided into two main books.
That's correct. Book 1 generally sets out the foundational requirements for the practitioner, the purity, the mindset, and describes the essential preparations and tools needed.
In Book 2.
Book 2 gets into the real nuts and bolts, the specifics of crafting the magical instruments, constructing the sacred space, the circle, creating the all-important pentacles, and then performing the various experiments or operations themselves.
We already touched on that primary requirement. Fearing and adoring God, contrition, devotion. That state of being is presented as the absolute starting point.
Yes, and the text explicitly says God will then lead him in the right way, implying that divine guidance actually accompanies the practitioner who approaches this potentially dangerous work with the proper reverence.
But even with that initial piety, the text immediately hammers home the absolute necessity of timing.
Oh, absolutely. It states very clearly that nothing can be effected without the operation of hours and of days and of the position of the moon. Diligence in observing these precise astrological and planetary timings is presented as just indispensable for achieving the desired effect.
So this isn't just a helpful suggestion. It's like a fundamental law of this magical system.
Completely. And the text provides incredibly detailed tables for figuring this out, all based on the classical system of planetary dominion over the days of the week and the hours of the day.
Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. Each day of the week is ruled by a specific planet. Saturday belongs to Saturn, Thursday to Jupiter, Tuesday to Mars, Sunday to the Sun, Friday to Venus, Wednesday to Mercury, and Monday to the Moon. pretty standard classical astrology.
Okay, makes sense. And this extends to the hours, too.
Yes. The very first hour after sunrise on any given day is ruled by that day's planet. So the first hour after sunrise on a Tuesday is ruled by Mars. After that first hour, the rulership of the subsequent hours follows a specific fixed order of the planets. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, then it repeats. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and so on. This cycle repeats every 7 hours through the day and night.
And the source material, Mathers' translation, it includes detailed tables for all this.
It does. Really detailed tables outlining these planetary hours. They even include the specific magical names attributed to each hour and the names of the angels who are said to rule them. It even provides examples to help you use the tables.
Right?
Like, if you wanted to find the ruler of the first hour after midnight on a Tuesday, you'd look at the table. It would tell you it's ruled by Mars, its magical name is Baron, and the ruling angel is Zamael.
It sounds a little complex, especially tracking sunrise times versus midnight.
It can be. The text mentions both hours from sunset to sunset and hours from midnight to midnight, which could be confusing. But the examples given seem to clarify that the tables with the magical names are generally based on a midnight to midnight reckoning.
And the key then links specific types of magical operations to these planetary timing.
Absolutely. It's very prescriptive. For example, operations related to Saturn, those are performed on Saturn's day, Saturday, and during Saturn's hours. These include things like summoning the souls of the dead.
Okay, heavy stuff.
Yeah. Also, matters concerning buildings either making them fortunate or causing their ruin, seeking knowledge or learning. And, unfortunately, also operations explicitly for destruction, causing death, sowing hatred, and discord.
Wow, quite a range for Saturn. What about Jupiter? Sounds more positive.
Generally, yes. Jupiter's day, Thursday, and its hours are for positive outcomes. Obtaining honors, acquiring riches, forging friendships, maintaining physical health, and fulfilling general desires or wishes.
And Mars,
Okay.
Tuesday. I'm guessing conflict.
Conflict and force, exactly. Mars' timing is associated with war, gaining military honor, courage, overthrowing enemies. But also, on the flip side, causing ruin, slaughter, cruelty, discord, wounding, and death. So it's used for both aggressive actions and potentially protective ones involving force.
Sun, Sunday. Sounds like success.
Wealth, hope, gaining advantages, general fortune, divination, earning favor from important people, dissolving enmity, making friends, generally positive, yeah.
Venus, Friday. Love and relationships.
That's the core. Friendship, kindness, love, pleasant undertakings, enjoyable journeys, things like that.
Mercury, Wednesday.
Yeah.
Communication. Intellect.
Spot on. Eloquence, intelligence, business matters, science, divination, causing wonders or apparitions, getting answers about the future. But interestingly, also associated with theft, writings, deceit, and merchandise. Kind of a trickster energy there.
And finally, the moon, Monday. What's that for?
Mutable matters, things that change or involve travel. Embassies, voyages, sending messages, navigation, reconciliation, love spells, and also commerce related to water.
The text gets even more specific, though, right? Linking certain actions to specific hours.
It does. It offers special notes. Like, to speak with spirits directly, it recommends the day and hour of Mercury or Saturn or the moon. For recovering stolen items, specifically Mercury's hours. For operations involving the souls of those slain in battle, very specific Mars hours are mentioned.
What about things like love spells or invisibility?
For love, kindness, or achieving invisibility, the hours of the Sun, Jupiter, or Venus are preferred. Mercury's hours are noted again for things like games, raillery, jests, sports-later things.
Interesting.
The days of the Sun, Jupiter, and Venus are deemed best for what the text calls extraordinary, uncommon, and unknown operations. Kind of a catch-all for advanced or unusual magic.
And the moon gets more specific mentions, too.
Yes. Moon hours are specifically for nocturnal visions, summoning spirits while you're asleep, or anything related to water. And Venus hours pop up again for casting lots, preparing poisons, and making those rather sinister powders provocative of madness.
Wow. So it's not just the day and hour. The moon's phase and its position in the zodiac are also critical.
Absolutely critical, according to the key. For operations like summoning spirits, necromancy, or recovering thefts, things linked to the moon's nature. The moon should ideally be in a terrestrial or earth sign, Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn.
For love or invisibility.
For love, grace, and invisibility, the moon needs to be in a fiery sign, Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius.
What about negative stuff like curses?
Operations for hatred, discord, and destruction require the moon to be in a watery sign, Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces?
And Aries signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius.
Those are linked to peculiar experiments that don't easily fit other categories.
And the phase of the moon matters too. Waxing versus waning.
Hugely important. The period from the new moon to the full moon, when the moon is increasing in light, is generally seen as favorable for most operations, especially constructive ones.
Okay.
The waning period, when the light is decreasing, is specifically used for operations involving war, strife, and discord.
And the dark moon.
The time when the moon is almost completely dark, just before the new moon, is specified for achieving invisibility and for operations related to death.
And there's a major warning about timing too, isn't there? Something absolutely forbidden.
Yes, a really crucial, emphatic warning. Never, ever begin an operation when the moon is in conjunction with the sun. Basically, during the exact new moon. This is considered extremely unfortunate, and the text flat out guarantees that nothing positive will be affected.
So when is the best time to start, generally?
The best starting point, conversely, is right after the conjunction, when the moon has just passed the sun and its light is beginning to increase again. That first sliver of the waxing crescent.
The level of detail in these timing instructions is just staggering.
It really is. It completely underscores the core belief here, that the success of the magic is inextricably linked to aligning the work with these cosmic cycles and planetary influences. It's not just what you do, it's when you do it, down to the hour and the moon's precise position and phase.
Okay, so once the practitioner has nailed down the perfect time, the focus shifts, preparing the magician themselves, the master of the art, and the physical space for the ritual. And the key sounds incredibly demanding about this part.
Oh, it is. The master must prepare their mind first. Free it completely from all external business, all extraneous thoughts, for a full 9 days leading up to the actual work.
9 days, wow.
Yeah. And this period is dedicated entirely to preparing all the necessary tools and materials for the operation. Intense focus.
And the location itself is paramount too.
Absolutely. It needs to be suitable, concealed, and importantly, removed from regular human habitation. The text lists places like desolate forests, deserted old houses, mountains, caves, even gardens or orchards, and especially crossroads, which have a long history in folklore and magic.
What if you can't get to a remote place like that?
If that's just not possible, the magician's own private chamber can work, but it must be thoroughly purified first. Physically clean, yes, but also ritually prepared by reciting specific psalms. The text mentions the 2nd, 67th, and 54th.
And the space needs to be perfumed and sprinkled.
Yes, with consecrated water and hyssop. Even the journey to the location, if it's remote, is part of the ritual. The master is instructed to recite a specific prayer on the way, invoking powerful holy names, asking for protection and pardon.
And sprinkle the path.
Sprinkle the path itself with the consecrated water, marking it as sacred ground as you approach the actual working space.
Now, the text also talks about companions or disciples. Are they always needed?
They are necessary, it says, especially for operations that require the construction of a formal magic circle. Ideally, the text suggests having 3 companions.
Okay. What if you can't find human companions?
This is one of those details that really jumps out. The text says if human companions aren't available, then a faithful and attached dog is needed.
A dog. Seriously.
Seriously, it's right there in the text. Mathers translates.
That's unusual. But there's something even more surprising, isn't there? If you need human companions for the circle, but can't get them...
Yes. The text says, in that situation, a little boy or girl is still better than the dog.
Wow. That's unsettling, frankly, from a modern perspective. Does it say how to prepare the child?
It does provide a specific ritual for preparing the child companion. It involves paring their fingernails, reciting a specific conjuration over them, compelling them to be obedient, speak the truth, ensuring spirits won't harm them or possess them.
Okay.
The child is then purified with the water of art, bathed, perfumed, and dressed in clean clothes. Yeah, this element of using children in ritual is definitely one of the more disturbing aspects of the text for us today.
Agreed. Regardless of who or what serves as a companion, human, dog, or child, they absolutely must be bound by an oath to obey their master completely.
Completely. The text warns explicitly that any disobedience will lead to immediate peril from the spirits invoked. Safety depends on obedience.
And for safety during the operation, everyone involved needs protection.
Yes. The master and all companions are instructed to wear consecrated pentacles over their breasts. These are covered with a silk veil and have been perfumed. The text reiterates, Obeying the master's directions precisely is crucial for staying safe inside that circle.
There's also daily prayer involved in the prep.
Mandatory, yes. For the master and any disciples, a specific conjuration needs to be repeated once in the morning and twice in the evening before the main work begins. It's essentially a prayer to God, asking for pardon, for propitiation, and explicitly asking for permission to actually see and interact with the spirits they intend to summon.
And personal purification rituals are essential too.
Absolutely. Bathing is required before operations. And it's not just a quick shower, it's accompanied by a specific prayer asking God for cleansing from all impurity, both physical and mental or spiritual concupiscence is the word used.
And special clothing.
Specific clothes must be worn for the ritual itself. Purified vestments, usually of linen or similar natural material. And crucially, they must never have been worn before. Virgin garments.
And there are rituals for putting them on.
Yes. Specific psalms are recited while dressing. The vestments themselves are perfumed and sprinkled with the consecrated water. Certain words are pronounced before continuing with the songs.
This level of personal and spatial purification, it really highlights the perceived gravity and, frankly, the danger of the work they're undertaking.
Exactly. You're meticulously creating this sacred, protected state for yourself and your environment, specifically to interact with what are seen as potentially volatile, powerful, and maybe dangerous spiritual forces.
And this meticulous preparation extends to every single physical object used in the ritual, the instruments of art.
Every single one. The general principle is crystal clear. Every tool must be consecrated specifically for magical use. This act is believed to imbue it with the necessary spiritual authority to function within the ritual.
What kind of materials are we talking about?
Often materials described as virgin, meaning brand new, never used for any other purpose, or metals purified by fire. Specific woods are mentioned for things like wands and staves, elder, cane, rosewood, hazel, nut tree. Metals are often tied to the planetary rulers: lead for Saturn, tin for Jupiter, iron for Mars, gold for the Sun, copper for Venus, mercury for Mercury, and silver for the Moon.
And cutting instruments. Knives, swords.
Knives, sickles, scimitars, daggers, poignards, lances typically made of steel. They require consecration, usually on the day and hour of Jupiter. The ritual involves a specific exorcism prayer directed at the instrument of steel, reciting psalms, perfuming it, sprinkling it, and then wrapping the finished tool in silk. The text even adds they are guarded by specific named angels.
There's one knife that's particularly distinctive, isn't there? The one with the black hilt.
Ah, yes, that one stands out. It's used exclusively for marking out the magic circle, and it has really unique and somewhat unsettling requirements.
Like what?
It has to be made on the day and hour of Saturn. Then it must be dipped in the blood of a black cat and the juice of hemlock. Specific characters and names have to be written on it, and then it's wrapped in black silk. Its stated purpose is very specific: to strike terror into the spirits.
Okay, that's intense. What about wands and staves?
Made from virgin wood, meaning wood that's only 1 year's growth, and it must be cut from the tree with a single stroke.
Wow.
This is done on the day and hour of Mercury, right at sunrise. Characters are written or engraved on them. Then there's a prayer of blessing and consecration invoking Adonai, Most Holy God. And finally, wrapped in silk, like the other tools.
Some manuscripts mention specific swords just for the disciples.
One manuscript does, yeah. It describes 3 distinct swords, each inscribed with specific angelic or powerful names on the pommel, the guard, and the blade itself. Names like Cardiel, Gabriel, Regin, Panorame, Hemesian, Oriel, Sarian, Gimmerin, Debelin. These also get the perfume and silk wrapping treatment.
Even the pen and ink have to be specially prepared.
Every detail matters. The pen must come from the 3rd feather of the right wing of a male gosling. It has to be plucked while reciting a specific conjuration. Then it's sharpened using the special penknife of the art, perfumed, sprinkled, and wrapped in silk.
And the ink.
The inkstand itself is made of earth or some other suitable material, and it has to be engraved with names like IHVH and Metatron on the day and hour of Mercury using another tool called the burn of art. The ink itself is a specific mixture: soot, gum, arabic, and gall, usually from a dog or other animal, and that ink mix has to be consecrated too. Even the act of pointing the pen, preparing the nib, involves writing the name, Enarton on the side with the knife of art.
It's relentless. What about blood? You mentioned the black cat blood, but it comes up elsewhere too.
It does for certain specific operations and tool preps. Bat blood is mentioned for a particular Mars pentacle, black hen blood for the divination sieve used for finding thieves, hare blood for making the magic garters for swift travel, and the blood of a dead man for crafting the magic girdle used in treasure hunting operations.
This is where Mathers, the translator, steps in with a warning, right?
Yes, exactly. He injects a strong personal note here, explicitly warning the reader that the use of blood is strongly associated with black magic and, in his view, should be avoided as much as possible.
That's really interesting. It shows him not just translating, but also interpreting, editing almost, inserting his own moral framework, probably based on the manuscript variants he preferred, and definitely influenced by his Golden Dawn background.
Absolutely. He's guiding the reader according to his own understanding of legitimate versus illegitimate magic.
Another crucial material seems to be virgin parchment or paper.
Yes, frequently required for writing down conjurations, characters, or making pentacles. It has to be new, pure, clean, and ritually exercised. Virgin parchment proper comes from an animal that wasn't old enough to reproduce. There's also mention of unborn parchment, which is even more specific, taken from an animal removed from its mother's uterus before birth.
The preparation for that sounds intense.
It's one of the most elaborate rituals described in the whole key. It involves selecting a specific type of male animal using the knife of art on the day and hour of Mercury, cutting a marsh reed with a new knife while reciting a conjuration of the reed and Psalm 72.
Okay.
This reed is then used to flay the animal while invoking powerful names and angels like Zohar and Zio. Consecrated salt is rubbed onto the skin with a prayer. The parchment is then stretched out inside the magic circle, bound with cord and stones, while invoking divine names like AGLA and IHVH for protection. It has to dry for 3 days. Then it's cut and detached from the frame with further ritual words and invocations like Antor, Ancor.
Just incredible. What about wax or earth? Used for figures.
Yes, used for making images or figures for certain types of spells. These materials also require their own exorcism. I exorcise thee, O creature of wax, or earth, followed by sprinkling and incensing. Earth, specifically, should be freshly dug up using only the hands and prepared each time it's needed for an operation.
The sheer scale of these preparations for every single tool, every material, it's just remarkable.
It really is. It speaks volumes about the underlying philosophy. Every single component used in the magical operation has to be ritually purified and charged, transformed from just a mundane object into a sacred instrument, imbued with the necessary magical potency. It's not enough to just have the tool. It has to be made correctly, following these incredibly complex rules.
It's like building the entire operation from the ground up with ritually perfected components.
Exactly. It's building that bridge between the material world you can touch and the spiritual realm you're trying to influence. Every piece matters.
And that leads us right into constructing the sacred space itself, the circle, which the text says is absolutely essential for most operations involving spirits.
An absolute necessity, yes. It states clearly that no experiments for conversing with spirits can be done without a circle, with only a few rare exceptions mentioned for specific experiments without a circle.
And the construction isn't just drawing a circle on the floor, is it? It's much more elaborate.
Far more elaborate, especially based on the description in that older manuscript, 2862 ad MSS. It's a complex geometric structure. It starts with placing the sickle or scimitar right at the center point.
Okay.
Then, using a 9-foot cord attached to that center point, the main circumference of the circle is traced. This tracing is done using the sword of art or that special knife with the black hilt.
Inside that main circle.
Inside, the 4 cardinal regions, east, west, south, north, are marked out, and specific symbols are placed within those regions.
Then more circles outside.
Yes. Outside the main circle, at a distance of 1 foot, another circle is traced using a consecrated knife or sword. Importantly, this second circle has an opening left towards the north. This serves as the designated entrance and exit point.
And another one.
And beyond that, at yet another foot's distance, a third circle is drawn, also with an opening facing north.
3 concentric circles, basically, with aligned northern openings. But it doesn't stop there.
Not at all. Beyond these 2 outer circles, but still centered on the same initial point, pentagrams are described. These surround the entire circle of art, and they contain symbols and names of the creator.
Pentagrams for protection.
Presumably, yes, adding layers of divine power. And then outside all these circles, a square is circumscribed around them.
A square.
A square. And believe it or not, beyond that square, a second square is drawn. This one is positioned so its angles touch the centers of the first square's sides. And the angles of this outer square point directly to the cardinal directions: east, west, north, and south.
That's incredibly complex geometry. What about those angles?
At the 4 angles of each of these squares, so 8 points in total, lesser circles are drawn. These are the designated locations for standing censers, which will hold lighted charcoal and sweet-smelling incense during the operation. It's a multi-layered, highly symbolic, geometric fortress.
Once this elaborate physical structure is marked out on the ground, what happens next?
The magus, the master of the art, leads the disciples or companions into the main innermost circle. He stations them at the 4 quarters north, south, east, west, and he sternly instructs them again. Do not fear, do not move from your assigned positions, no matter what you might see or hear during the ritual.
And they're armed inside the circle.
Yes. Each companion within the circle must hold a naked sword separate from the master's main sword of art, and they must keep their hand on the hilt throughout, emphasizing readiness, defense, and the absolute importance of staying put.
The magus then steps out briefly.
Yes, to kindle the censers that are placed in those lesser circles at the angles of the outer squares. He uses exorcised incense for this. After lighting and placing them, he re-enters the main circle, carefully closes those northern openings they used, and reiterates the warnings to the disciples one last time.
And then incenses the circle.
Finally, yes. He incenses the circle towards the 4 quarters using something called the trumpet of art, possibly a horn or funnel used for directing incense smoke.
Fumigations, the incense seem critical.
Absolutely critical, both in preparing the space and during the operation itself. Fresh charcoal is used, placed in new, glazed earthen vessels. The fire itself must be exorcised first, commanding any negative influences or entities to depart from it.
And the spices for the incense.
Spices appropriate to the planet governing the specific operation are chosen and sprinkled onto the exorcised fire. These spices, too, must be exorcised beforehand, ensuring their purity and magical virtue. A blessing prayer follows, asking God to make the fumigations pleasing and effective for the work.
Consecrated water and hyssop are also key. For sprinkling.
Yes, necessary for sprinkling and purifying basically everything: the place, the tools, the practitioners themselves. Clear spring water is used, put into a vessel made of brass, lead, or earth. Consecrated salt is added.
And prayers for those too.
Oh, yes. Both the salt and the water have extensive exorcism and blessing prayers recited over them, invoking divine names like God of Gods, asking for purification, virtue, and the power to banish phantoms before the mixture is applied using a sprinkler, often made of hyssop, vervain, or other specified herbs.
The whole construction and preparation of the circle. It's clearly about creating this intensely protected, purified, ritually charged container.
Absolutely. It's a boundary designed to keep potentially dangerous forces out, or at least contained, to compel the spirits to appear either within the circle, if summoned there, or immediately outside it, but under controlled conditions, and fundamentally, to ensure the safety of the practitioners inside that boundary.
It's so much more than just a line drawn on the ground. It's like a miniature cosmos built out of sacred geometry, divine names, prayers, incense, water, salt.
A fortress of faith and ritual. And within this sacred space, one of the most powerful elements, according to the key itself, are the pentacles.
The text is really emphatic about their importance, isn't it?
Absolutely emphatic. It states quite plainly that the whole science and understanding of our key depended upon the operation, knowledge, and use of pentacles. They are central.
And their main purpose.
Their primary stated purpose is simple but crucial: striking terror into the spirits and reducing them to obedience. The text claims the spirits fear and tremble at the mere sight of correctly made and consecrated pentacles.
But their power goes beyond just controlling spirits.
Oh yes, far beyond. They're described as having great virtue against all sorts of perils, dangers associated with earth, air, water, and fire. They're said to protect against poison, physical infirmities, all forms of magical attack like curses or enchantments, sortilege, sorcery, and even general terror or fear. Carrying a consecrated pentacle is presented almost as a guarantee of safety.
What else?
They are also said to help acquire grace and goodwill from others, to have the power to extinguish fires, stop floods or uncontrolled water, and even cause animals to obey through the fear of the divine names written upon them.
The text really elevates their status, claiming they contain divine names written by God himself.
Yes, it claims they contain the ineffable and most holy names written by the very finger of God, just like the commandments given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Solomon, the story goes, received the knowledge of these pentacles directly from an angel through divine revelation.
That gives them immense authority within this magical system. They're like divine mandates made tangible.
Exactly. Which is why their construction, like everything else, has very specific timing requirements. They should be made on the days and hours of Mercury, when the moon is in an aerial or terrestrial sign, and importantly, when the moon's light is increasing. Specific solar conditions are also mentioned.
And the materials matter, metal or paper.
Yes. The most suitable metal is the one traditionally associated with the ruling planet of the specific pentacle lead for Saturn, tin for Jupiter, iron for Mars, gold for the Sun, copper for Venus, a mixture, often mercury amalgam for Mercury, and silver for the Moon.
What if you can't use metal?
If metal isn't used, then exercise virgin paper is the alternative. But it should be colored appropriately for the planet. Black for Saturn, celestial blue for Jupiter, red for Mars, gold or yellow for the Sun, green for Venus, mixed colors for Mercury, and silver or white for the Moon.
And the creation process itself is a ritual.
Of course. Engraving on metal has to be done with the consecrated instrument of art at the proper astrological time. If drawing on paper, the exercise pen and the specially prepared consecrated colors must be used.
Where should it be done?
It must be done in a special chamber, one that's clean, pure, and where the magician won't be interrupted. The place should be incensed and perfumed. The sky should be clear and serene outside.
And it has to be done all at once.
Ideally, the work should begin and be finished within the prescribed hour. But the text acknowledges interruptions might happen. If so, the work must stop and only recommence at the next astrologically correct day and hour. The materials, naturally, must be virgin or purified. The size is apparently arbitrary, but all the ritual rules and solemnities must be strictly followed for it to be effective.
There's a fascinating comment in the text about why they work, isn't there? Not about logic.
Yes. It's a key insight into the worldview. It says the effectiveness of the pentacles dependeth not on argument or reasoning, but on firm belief and correct execution. It's presented as a science based on faith in the system and precise ritual action, not on intellectual understanding or debate about how it works. You just have to do it right and believe it works.
Mathers' translation provides drawings and descriptions for a whole set of these pentacles, right? Organized by planet.
It does. It lists and depicts a specific number of pentacles for each planetary category. 7 for Saturn, 7 for Jupiter, 7 for Mars, 7 for the Sun, 5 for Venus, 5 for Mercury, and 6 for the Moon. A total of 44 in this version.
Maybe we could look at a few examples just to get a feel for what they contain.
Sure. Let's take the first pentacle of Saturn. Its purpose is stated as striking terror into spirits and compelling their submission. What's on it? The 4 great names of God, IHVH, Adonai, Adonai, YI, often seen as a form of Ahai, and I itself. It's also inscribed with a verse from Psalm 72. The Ethiopians shall kneel before him, his enemies shall lick the dust. Divine names plus scripture.
What about the second Saturn? That one's famous.
Ah, yes, the Sator Arepo Tenet Opera Rota Square. That ancient palindrome pops up here. It's said to be valuable against adversities and especially good for repressing the pride of spirits. Its meaning is debated, but here it's used purely for its perceived magical power.
Okay, how about Jupiter? More positive.
The third pentacle of Jupiter is designed to defend the invokers and compel spirits to obey when shown the pentacle. It includes the magical seal of Jupiter, the seal of its governing intelligence, Jophiel, the names IHVH and Adonai, and a verse from Psalm 125 about Mount Zion never being removed. Protection and authority.
For conflict.
The fourth pentacle of Mars is presented as having great power in war, granting victory. It centers on the powerful name Agla, a notaricon for Thou art mighty forever, O Lord. It's surrounded by letters forming IHVH and EL, God, and features a verse from Psalm 110. The Lord at thy right hand shall wound even kings in the day of his wrath. Very martial.
The sun pentacles sound powerful too, the first one.
The first pentacle of the sun is particularly striking. It's said to contain the head of the great angel Metatron, described as the countenance of Shaddai, God Almighty. At the sight of this, all creatures are said to obey, and angelic spirits are compelled to appear. It includes the name El Shaddai, and a Latin verse basically saying all things were made by God and obey him, supreme authority.
And one from the moon.
Yeah.
Do the first one.
The first pentacle of the moon is depicted almost like a hieroglyphic door or gate. Fittingly, it's said to serve for calling forth spirits associated with the moon, and also for magically opening any doors or locks, however securely fastened. It contains the name IHVH, names of lunar angels like Squiel and Yashiel, and a verse from Psalm 107. He hath broken the gates of brass and smitten the bars of iron in sunder, opening ways.
These examples really show the method, don't they? It's the synthesis. Combinations of divine names, angelic names, specific geometric seals or symbols, relevant scriptural verses, all tied to planetary influences, and all inscribed on specially prepared materials at precisely calculated times.
Exactly. It's how these powerful objects are created within the system. They become the visual and tangible embodiment of the authority the magician is attempting to wield. They draw directly on what the text presents as the highest power God and intermediate divine or angelic forces in order to compel the lower spirits subject to that hierarchy.
They're like badges of office backed by divine power.
That's a good way to put it. Badges of office recognized within that spiritual hierarchy.
Okay, so the space is prepared, the practitioner is purified, the tools are crafted, the pentacles are ready. Now the key gets into actually doing the magic, right? Putting this system into practice through specific experiments.
Yes, Book 2 delves into detailed instructions for various specific operations or experiments, as the text calls them.
And these vary in complexity. Some need the full circle setup, others don't.
That's right. Some experiments are described as simpler and can apparently be performed without a circle. Others are more complex and definitely require the full setup within the sacred space, utilizing all those meticulously prepared tools and the power of the pentacles.
What's an example of one of these experiments? Invisibility seems like a classic magical goal.
It is, and the key provides instructions for an experiment of invisibility found in a couple of different chapter variants within the manuscripts Mathers consulted. It involves reciting specific invocation formulas, calling on certain angels, and, interestingly, a particular spirit named Almirus, who is explicitly described as the master of invisibility, along with his named ministers like Chiro and Mater.
So you're invoking a specific spirit for invisibility.
In that version, yes. But there's another method described in the Lansdowne 1203 manuscript variant that's, well, considerably more elaborate and frankly a bit strange.
How so?
It involves making a small wax image of a man, but it has to be done at a very specific time, in January, on the day and hour of Saturn. You then write a specific character on the image's skull using a consecrated needle. You also write certain words and characters on a strip of skin taken from a frog or a toad.
Frog skin. Okay. Then what?
Then you suspend this wax image by one of your own hairs from the roof of a dark cavern precisely at midnight. You perfume it with the appropriate incense for invisibility and say specific words invoking powerful figures like Metatron and Melech. After this, the image is buried inside a small wooden box made of deal wood right there in the cavern.
So how do you use it to become invisible?
To actually use the invisibility, the text says you carry this buried image. Presumably, you dig it up first in your left pocket, and as you carry it, you say the words, "Come unto me and never quit me." And crucially, when you're done being invisible, you must return the image to its burial place in the cavern. You can't just keep it.
That's fascinating. It feels like a blend of the key's more formal ritual structure, the timings, the names like Metatron with elements that feel much more like, well, folk magic. The frog skin, the hair, the cavern burial.
Exactly. It shows how different magical traditions might have been mixed or absorbed into copies of the key over time.
What's another interesting experiment described? Maybe something practical.
How about discovering who committed a theft? That's described in variants of Chapter 8. One method is quite dramatic. You suspend a sieve using a cord that was previously used to hang a man.
Whoa, okay. Grim.
Yeah. You then write specific characters shown in a figure on the rim of the sieve using blood. The type isn't specified here, which is interesting given Mathers' warnings. Then you spin this sieve over a brass basin filled with fresh fountain water, while stirring the water with a laurel twig held in your right hand. You gaze into the water when it becomes still, and the text claims the form of the thief will appear reflected there.
Sounds like scrying, but with extra steps. Is there another method for finding a thief?
Yes, a more widely known version, also described in the key, uses the sieve and a pair of scissors. This is often called kashinomancy.
How does that work?
You stick the points of a pair of scissors firmly into the rim of the sieve. Then, the rings of the scissors are allowed to rest loosely on the extended thumbnails of two persons facing each other. One of the persons then recites a specific prayer. It includes a series of rather unusual words, dies mis yes chet benedon fet danima amitamaos, and invokes God, specifically mentioning the liberation of the Holy Susanna from false accusation.
And how does it reveal the thief?
The principle is simple divination. If the person suspected, whose name might be recited, is innocent, the sieve remains perfectly still. If they are guilty, the sieve will supposedly turn or swivel on the thumbnails. The editor, Mathers, or possibly Cavendish, notes this is a very ancient method of divination that was adapted in the medieval period, sometimes adding invocations of St. Peter and St. Paul.
Let's look at one more of these specific experiments. What about the magic garters? That sounds intriguing.
The experiment of the magic garters, from a Chapter 12 variant, is another one that really stands out for its specific and unusual ingredients and procedures. It's designed for incredibly swift travel.
How do you make them?
First, you need to make tubular garters from the skin of a stag. Then you write specific words and characters, shown in Figure 8 of the text, onto the flesh side of the skin. This writing must be done using the blood of a hare, and the hare must have been killed specifically on June 25th, close to midsummer.
Okay, very specific timing again. And what?
Before stitching the garters closed, you fill them with green mugwort herb, which also must have been gathered on June 25th before sunrise. And then you place the eye of a barbell fish into each end of each garter before closing them up.
Hare blood, mugwort, fish eyes. Quite the recipe. How do you use them?
To use them on the morning you intend to travel, you first wash the garters in a running stream before sunrise. Then you place them on your legs above the knee. You also need a rod cut from a holm oak tree, also prepared on June 25th. You stand facing your intended destination, write the name of the place on the ground with the rod. The text guarantees your journey will then be incredibly fast and completely without fatigue.
How do you stop? Do you just arrive instantly?
To stop the effect, you have to say a specific word, AMECH, and strike the air 3 times with the holm oak wand. Then the magical travel effect ceases.
What about the magic carpet? That's another classic trope.
The key has instructions for that too, in a Chapter 13 variant. It involves crafting a carpet from new white wool. This has to be done during the full moon, when the moon is in the zodiac sign of Capricorn and during an hour ruled by the sun. Very specific alignment.
Where do you make it?
You go to a pure, clean spot out in the country, spread the carpet on the ground so it points east and west. Then you draw a circle, enclosing the carpet completely. You stand at the east point of the circle, holding your magic wand. You call upon specific angels at the 4 cardinal points. The text names Michael in the east, Raphael in the north, Gabriel in the west, and Muriel in the south. Although the editor notes a potential confusion in the directions for Michael and Muriel, suggesting maybe following the path of the sun is intended.
Didn't what?
You return to the east point, invoke the powerful name AGLA, lift the eastern corner of the carpet, recite Psalm 91, the Psalm of Protection, and then fold the carpet while saying specific magical words. Kabustira.
Yeah.
You keep the folded carpet carefully stored.
How do you use it? For travel or something else?
This carpet seems to be more for divination or receiving messages. To use it on the night of a full or new moon, between midnight and daybreak, you first prepare the evening before by writing specific characters and names, shown in Figure 9, onto a piece of azure blue virgin parchment using a pen made from a dove's feather.
Okay.
Then you go to your chosen spot, maybe a place where treasure is suspected to be hidden, or just any clean, pure place. You cover your head and body completely with the magic carpet. You place a censer with new fire and incense underneath the carpet. You lie prostrate, face down. You hold your wand upright, resting your chin on the top of it. You hold the prepared parchment against your forehead. Then you recite a specific prayer beginning, Adonai El Shaddai. The text promises you will then hear the answer to your query distinctly.
Fascinating. It's like creating a contained visionary space. One last example. Well, what about finding treasure? That's often linked to grimoires.
Yes, Chapter 14 variants describe an operation specifically for mastering a treasure guarded by spirits. The text identifies these spirits as gnomes, who are said to guard subterranean treasures. It notes they often harm humans who approach out of sheer avarice, but suggests that if the magician can gain familiarity with them, they might hear the treasure, especially if the magician's objective is to use it for good.
What does the operation involve?
The timing is again very specific. Sunday before sunrise, ideally during the summer months, July 10th to August 20th, when the moon is in the sign of Leo. The magician goes to the spot where the treasure is believed to be. They describe a circle using the sword of art. Then, they, or workmen, begin to dig within that circle.
And rituals continue during the digging.
Yes. The opening must be censed 3 times daily with appropriate incense. The magician must wear their proper magical raiment. A special lamp is suspended over the opening. The oil for this lamp has very specific, grim ingredients. It must be mixed with the fat of a man who died in July, and the wick must be made from the cloth of his burial shroud.
Good heavens. What about the workmen?
The workmen involved in the digging are fortified with a special magic girdle. This is made from the skin of a newly slain goat, and it's inscribed with specific words and characters shown in Figure 10, written using the blood of a dead man.
More blood and body parts.
Yes. The workmen are explicitly warned not to fear any specters or strange phenomena they might see or hear while digging, but to work boldly. If the work isn't finished in a single day, the opening is covered over with wood and earth. The master magician must remain present throughout, wearing his raiment, holding the magic sword, and reciting a specific conjuration that invokes powerful divine names, YIHH, IAH, Adonai, Elohim, etc., and directly commands the gnomes guarding the treasure.
These examples, while some parts are definitely disturbing, they really illustrate the incredibly physical, material, and procedural nature of the magic described in the key.
Absolutely. It's not just about willpower or visualization or belief alone, although belief is stated as necessary. It's about executing this complex recipe, almost like magical chemistry, involving very specific ingredients, timings, tools, words, and actions.
It's this constant blend of the highly spiritual entirety, the prayers to God, the divine names, the angelic invocations, and these very practical, sometimes mundane, sometimes bizarre, highly ritualized physical acts.
And as we noted, some of those physical acts involve substances and actions that Mathers himself, the translator presenting this text, felt compelled to caution against, drawing a line based on his own ethical framework.
This detailed level of instruction naturally leads us to the core interaction itself. The actual prayers and conjurations used to communicate with or compel the spirits. The text keeps stressing how important devotion is here.
Yes, it repeatedly emphasizes the absolute necessity of saying these prayers and conjurations with very great devotion. It's not just reading words off a page.
There's a general prayer given early on in chapter 5 that seems to set the tone.
Right. It's addressed directly to the Lord God, Holy Father, Almighty, Merciful, All-Knowing. It asks for knowledge of hidden things, for understanding. And it explicitly states that the ceremony about to be performed is not undertaken to tempt God's power or majesty, but rather to penetrate secrets and attain understanding. It invokes Adonai, Lord, throughout.
But the real heavy lifting, the part designed to compel the spirits, that's the general conjuration.
That's the engine of compulsion, yes. Also in chapter 5, and it's incredibly long, incredibly complex, and deliberately layered. It's designed to compel the spirits by overwhelming them with escalating appeals to every conceivable form of divine and cosmic authority.
How does it start?
It begins relatively abstractly, invoking the spirits by the power, wisdom, and virtue of God's own spirit. By divine knowledge, mercy, strength, greatness, unity, establishing the ultimate source of all power.
Then it gets into names.
Then it moves straight into invoking by the most holy names of God, starting with Ihaya, which it describes as the root of all other divine names, the name Adam invoked, then Iod, representing simplicity and unity, the name Abel invoked, Adonai Melech, the name Joshua used to stop the sun, Shaddai, linked to the ninth, Sephirah, Yesod. It connects these names directly to biblical figures and miraculous events to establish their power.
And it doesn't stop with God's names.
No, it brings in the entire heavenly hierarchy, invoking by the troops of angels who constantly cry, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Elohim Zabaoth, Holy, holy, holy Lord God of hosts, and explicitly by the 10 archangels who preside over the 10 Sephiroth of the Kabbalistic tree of life, Metatron for Kether, Retziel for Chokmah, Zaphuel for Bina, and so on down the tree, invoking the very structure through which God is believed to influence creation.
Wow, it's building this immense weight of authority. What next?
The conjuration continues, drawing power from the very fabric of the universe itself, invoking by all the marvels of creation, the heavens, the earth, the sea, the abyss, the firmament, the sun, the moon, the stars, the waters above the heavens, the holy angels, the winds, the tempests, even the inherent virtue believed to reside in plants and stones. Basically, invoking everything created by God as a testament to his power.
And only after all that cosmic buildup does it actually address the demons directly.
Exactly. Only after establishing this vast, overwhelming context of divine and cosmic power does the conjuration issue the first direct command, ordering the demons to come promptly from whatever part of the world they may be in, stating that by this power they are unable to remain anywhere else, they must appear.
But the invocation keeps escalating even after that command.
Oh yes, much further. It calls upon sacred texts and objects as additional sources of compelling power. The 2 stone tables of the law given to Moses, the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, the 7 burning lamps before God's throne, the Holy of Holies within the temple, the Ark of the Covenant, and the cherubim associated with the Ark.
More holy names are invoked too.
A whole litany of them. More divine and powerful epithets listed one after another in the source text, including names it claims were written with blood in the sign of an eternal alliance. Very potent imagery.
And it mentions specific unknown names.
Yes, the conjuration lists what it calls most holy and unknown names, names by which the demons are said to especially tremble. Names like Baruch, Bacurabon, Padicel, Anephitin, Alberia. These are presented as particularly potent weapons against resistant spirits, perhaps names whose meanings were deliberately obscured or considered too powerful for common knowledge.
It invokes famous symbols of power too. Solomon's seal.
Absolutely. It invokes by powerful symbols of divine authority. The seal of David, the ring and seal of Solomon, which legend says God gave him, and significantly, the 9 metals or pentacles, which the magician should be holding or displaying at this point. These pentacles are described here as the mysteries of mysteries or secrets of secrets, which the spirits are compelled to behold in the magician's hand, consecrated and exercised.
It keeps layering on the pressure. What else?
It specifically invokes by the Tetragrammaton IHVH again, by the terror of the final judgment day, by the seat of Baldashia, often interpreted as a name for God's throne, and by the name Yai, which the text associates with Moses invoking God to cause the earth to open and swallow the rebellious Dathan and Abiram in the book of Numbers. It directly threatens the spirits with a curse and being bound into the lowest abyss if they prove rebellious.
So it's a mix of invoking higher powers and direct threats.
Constantly. The text repeatedly emphasizes God's terrible paths and his holy habitation, commanding the spirits to leave their own abodes and come quickly. It threatens them with deprivation of their rank and status, and being cast into the kingdom of fire and sulfur if they remain contumacious, stubbornly rebellious. It even graphically describes consuming fire issuing from God's mouth against them.
But isn't there also a conditional promise mixed in with the threats?
Yes, interestingly, interwoven with these terrifying threats is a conditional offer. If the spirits come promptly and voluntarily, without deceit, they will be rewarded. They'll smell pleasant perfumes from the incense, be allowed to see the symbol of the Creator, likely a specific pentacle, behold the names of his holy angels, and then, crucially, they will be dismissed peacefully with thanks and allowed to return to their places without harm.
The carrot and a stick approach. What if they remain stubborn despite the threats in the offer?
Then the threats intensify dramatically. The magician declares they will continue the conjuration ceaselessly, using even more powerful names. Names the spirits have supposedly never heard before from any other source. Names that make the spirits themselves and even their ruling princes tremble in fear.
It gets legalistic, too.
It does. The magician pronounces a warrant of arrest against them, a sentence condemning them to horrible diseases like leprosy, and ultimately a terrifying death by consuming fire if they continue to disobey. It's invoking judgment upon them.
And there's a final constraint, like the ultimate blast.
Exactly. The final constraint is presented as the absolute last resort, the ultimate compulsion. It invokes names considered supremely powerful. On, an Egyptian name sometimes associated with the sun or being. Ihia, IHVH, described here as ineffable, whose knowledge is hidden even from the angels. El, described as the powerful and consuming fire.
Yeah.
And the light of angels itself.
And the command here.
The command is absolute. Come ye forthwith, with joy and quickness, without fraud or deceit. They are compelled to appear upon seeing the signs and names of the Creator and the holy pentacles displayed by the magician. There's no room left for refusal at this point, according to the text.
This general conjuration, it's just remarkable. It's like a magical legal brief, leveraging every possible source of higher spiritual authority, divine names, angelic hierarchies, the structure of the cosmos, biblical events, sacred objects, threats of damnation, promises of reward, all to utterly overwhelm and compel these lower spirits.
It really is. It's structured not as negotiation or a polite request, but as a forceful, authoritative command backed by the perceived power of the entire universe itself, as understood within this specific theological and magical system.
Okay, so assuming the spirit appears and the magician achieves whatever they set out to do, how do they end the operation? You can't just leave a summoned spirit hanging around, presumably.
No, definitely not. After the desired results are obtained, the spirits must be formally given a license to depart. This is actually a much simpler formula compared to the complexity of the conjuration.
What does it say?
It's quite straightforward. In the name of Ordine, let each of you return unto his place. Be there peace between us and you, and be ye ready to come when ye are called. It's polite but firm and establishes peace while retaining the right to summon them again.
And there's a concluding ritual action.
Yes. After giving the license, the magician is instructed to recite the first chapter of Genesis, starting Bereshith bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. This likely serves to reassert divine order and formally close the sacred space.
Is there an alternative way to dismiss them?
The text mentions an alternative. Simply show the holy pentacles to the spirits again, ask them what they desire, which is an interesting addition, implying the spirits might have requests or needs of their own, and then send them away using the license.
The text also describes a way to bind spirits more permanently, so that they come whenever called.
Yes, there's a method described for binding spirits to a particular practitioner. This involves creating a special book made of virgin paper and writing the conjurations used within it. Then, during a summoning, the magician constrains the demons to swear upon this very book that they will come obediently whenever called in the future.
And this book becomes a tool itself.
Exactly. The book is then covered with sacred sigils, perhaps drawn on a silver plate attached to the cover, which is also engraved with the holy pentacles. When the magician wants to summon those specific spirits again, they simply need to open this consecrated book, ideally on a Sunday or Thursday night between midnight and daybreak. The spirits who swore the oath are then compelled to appear.
And the text mentions why night is preferred.
Yes. It adds a little note that demons are ashamed by day, referring to them again with that phrase, animals of darkness, suggesting they prefer or are perhaps confined to the hours of obscurity.
This entire system, then the incredibly elaborate preparation of self, tools, and space, the strict adherence to astrological timing, the crafting and use of pentacles, the layered authoritative conjurations, and the formal dismissal or binding it paints a really vivid picture.
It absolutely does. It shows a worldview where the spiritual realm is perceived as intensely real, definitely hierarchical, and crucially, capable of being interacted with, influenced, and even compelled through highly precise ritual action and the correct wielding of divine authority derived from God and his names.
It really is a science of power, isn't it? But one rooted in a very particular, albeit paradoxical, theological framework. The magician acts almost like a conductor, or maybe a channel, for divine force to achieve their aims.
Precisely. Whether those aims appear benevolent or, frankly, quite malevolent to an outside observer, the mechanism described is the same, leveraging higher power to control lower forces.
Now, beyond all these practical step-by-step instructions, the source material, especially that end commentary in the Lansdowne 1203 manuscript, it delves into some deeper, more mystical concepts that seem to underpin this whole system, right?
Yes, exactly. It offers a fascinating allegorical interpretation of the pentagram, the five-pointed star, that goes way beyond just seeing it as a protective symbol.
How does he interpret it?
It presents the pentagram as representing the power of good, embodied in the letters of the divine name, often interpreted in these contexts as IHVSHH, adding the letter Shin for spirit or the Messiah to the tetragrammaton. And this power is seen as constantly engaged in a struggle against five symbolic accursed nations.
Accursed nations, what do they represent?
The commentary frames this whole thing allegorically. It says the real history of the people of God is actually the allegorical legend of humanity. These five accursed nations are listed as symbols for human vices or negative forces that oppose spiritual growth. The Amalekites represent aggressors, the Geburim are the violent ones, the Raphaim are cowards, the Nephilim are the voluptuous ones, given to sensual excess, and the Anakim represent the anarchists, those who reject divine law and order.
And the letters of the divine name fight these vices.
Exactly. The interpretation explains how each letter of that five-letter divine name is said to vanquish one or more of these symbolic nations. For instance, Yodai, representing the scepter of the Father or divine authority, conquers the anarchists. Shin, symbolizing the purifying fire of the Lord and the equilibrating law of justice, overcomes the aggressors. He, the first He, representing the gentleness of the Mother or divine mercy, overcomes the violent. Thou, V or you, the sword of Michael and generation through effort, overcomes the cowards. And the final He-H, representing the painful bringing forth of creation, overcomes the voluptuous.
So this shifts the whole focus, doesn't it? The magical work isn't just about controlling external spirits anymore. It becomes symbolic of a cosmic and deeply internal battle against negative forces and human failings.
Precisely. It adds a layer of spiritual psychology or cosmology onto the practical ritual. The commentary also discusses the princes of the perverse spirits, explicitly identifying them with ancient false gods like Baal, Belphegor, Moloch, Adramelech. It states these idols are now destroyed, their power gone, only their names remaining as symbols of error.
And it frames the magical battle in terms of truth versus error.
Yes, it asserts that the true God conquers demons as truth triumphs over error. The ongoing wars of Michael against Satan are interpreted symbolically, representing spiritual movement, evolution, and progress. The devil is defined very starkly as the god of refusal of divine will and order.
There's a provocative statement about religion and superstition, too.
Yes, quite provocative. The text claims, accredited idolatries are religions in their time. Superannuated idolatries are superstitions and sacrileges. This suggests a kind of historical relativism, where what's considered a valid religion in one era might be seen as demonic superstition in another. It concludes, the pantheon of phantoms, which are then in vogue, is the heaven of the ignorant. Strong words.
This section also touches on some really high-level Kabbalistic concepts, schema, hemperash, yetzirah.
It does. It references Solomon claiming to have achieved great things through the virtue of the schema hamphrash, the divided name, often referring to the 72-fold name of God derived from Exodus, and the 32 paths of wisdom from the Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Formation. It delves into the fundamental relationship between letters, numbers, ideas, forces, and Elohim, the creative divine power.
How does it explain that connection?
It states that number, weight, and measure determine form. That substance is ultimately one, and God creates eternally through these principles. Happy is he, it says, who understands the letters and the numbers. Because letters arise from numbers, numbers arise from ideas, ideas from forces, and forces emanate from Elohim. It's a chain of manifestation.
And the schema is key to this.
The schema hamphrash is described as the synthesis of Elohim. It's depicted structurally. The schema is one, yet composed of two columns, like the pillars of the temple or the tree of life, containing three fundamental powers, manifesting in fourfold form, like the elements or the tetragrammaton. This reflection gives 8. Multiplied by 3 gives 24 thrones of wisdom.
24 thrones, what's on them?
Upon each throne sits a crown with 3 rays. Each ray bears a name, and each name represents an absolute idea. This structure yields 72 names in total, 24 by 3, which are the 72 names of the schema hamphrash.
And these names have practical application.
Yes. The commentary states these 72 names are to be written on 36 talismans. 2 names per talisman, 1 on each side. These talismans are then divided into 4 series of 9, corresponding to the 4 letters of the tetragrammaton, IHVH. Each series is symbolized by a specific object. The first series, Yod, by Aaron's flowering rod. The second, He, by the cup of Joseph. The third, Vow, by the sword of David. The symbol for the final He is given in this particular excerpt.
Wow. That adds this incredibly deep layer of abstract, high-level mysticism to the very practical, hands-on ritual work described earlier.
It really does. It implies that the rituals, the pentacles, the conjurations, they aren't just arbitrary actions. They're believed to be tapping into this complex underlying structure of reality described by Kabbalah, where divine names and numbers are the fundamental building blocks. Understanding the letters and numbers, as the text emphasizes, is the key to comprehending this entire magical science.
Okay, so after all that complexity, the history, the philosophy, the intense preparations, the detailed experiments, the powerful conjurations, the deep mysticism, how does the key wrap things up? Does it end on a high note?
It concludes with some very, very stern and emphatic warnings. It really underscores the extreme gravity and the potential peril involved in undertaking this work.
How so?
It explicitly states right near the end that this is a key of secrets, and it is strictly not intended for the foolish, the stupid, the ignorant, or the profane. It's not for dabblers.
And there are curses for misuse.
Yes, multiple curses are pronounced. Accursed be he who undertaketh our art without the requisite qualities. Accursed be he who invoketh the name of God in vain, warning that such individuals will be punished, abandoned by God, and ultimately consigned to hell.
But the strongest warning seems reserved for intent, using it for bad purposes.
Absolutely. The most severe warning is directed squarely at malicious intent. Accursed be he who useth this knowledge unto an evil end. This curse is said to apply both in this world and the world to come, specifically linked to the terrible sin of blaspheming God's name by using it for harmful or evil magic.
Does it warn about practical consequences too, not just spiritual ones?
It does. It warns that using this knowledge for unclean or impure ends will not only bring spiritual condemnation, but will also cause the spirits themselves to flee from the practitioner. This makes it exceedingly difficult, perhaps impossible, to perform any further magical work successfully, even if attempted later for genuinely pure intentions. You basically ruin your connection.
So that reinforces the idea that while the power might seem automatic during the ritual, the long-term consequences and the ability to continue the practice are deeply tied to the practitioner's overall intent and moral purity.
Exactly. Purity is stressed again as paramount. Throughout the conclusion, the practitioner must be pure in body and in mind and without blemish. The text insists one last time that absolutely no preparations must be omitted. Diligence is key.
But if you follow the rules, the key offers a promise.
It does end with a promise of efficacy. If the knowledge contained within the key is thoroughly remembered and used precisely according to all its ordinances, the text assures the practitioner they can achieve their desired end. It even uses the vivid metaphor that they might operate and succeed even unto flying with the wings of the wind, implying mastery over the elements or achieving seemingly impossible feats.
And the final statement.
It wraps up by declaring unequivocally that in this book is comprised all science of magical art, and that it should be strictly kept by the practitioner, emphasizing both its completeness and the need for secrecy. Don't share this knowledge lightly.
So this deep dive into the Key of Solomon the King, based entirely on Mathers' translation of these historical manuscripts, it really reveals a text of profound and sometimes, unsettling complexity.
It truly does. It presents this system of ritual magic that somehow manages to paradoxically intertwine deep religious devotion, constant appeals to the highest divine authority, God himself, with incredibly explicit, step-by-step instructions for compelling and controlling spirits that are often depicted as infernal or demonic.
It's a system built entirely on the premise that real power comes from God, but accessing and directing that power requires this unbelievably meticulous ritual execution.
Right. Requiring precise astrological timing, crafting tools from very specific materials using elaborate consecration rituals, constructing these multi-layered sacred spaces, wielding powerful divine and angelic names like weapons or keys, and creating these consecrated pentacles as tangible focal points of that divine authority.
And the philosophical background, especially those Kabbalistic references towards the end, suggests this practical magic isn't happening in a vacuum. It's underpinned by this complex understanding of the universe's hidden structure, where names, numbers, letters, and symbols are the actual keys to interacting with fundamental forces.
And yet, those constant stern warnings against misuse, particularly using the knowledge for evil, they underscore the perceived moral weight and the potential danger associated with wielding this power. It frames it as a sacred science, demanding purity of intention and rigorous adherence to its myriad rules, despite the fact that the text itself includes procedures for causing harm, destruction, or madness. It's a real contradiction.
It really leaves you contemplating the core nature of this whole system, doesn't it? Is it, as presented, truly a mechanism for commanding external spiritual entities by leveraging divine authority against them?
Or is it, perhaps, as some modern interpretations suggest, a highly sophisticated, deeply ritualized psychological method for accessing and directing powerful, perhaps dangerous, forces from within the human psyche itself, using the symbolism of God and demons to map internal states?
And how do you reconcile those fervent, pious prayers to God right alongside detailed instructions for summoning, threatening, and binding beings described as denizens of hell?
Is the magician seeking divine permission to interact with the infernal realm? Or are they using divine names and authority as weapons to compel the infernal, whether God explicitly approves of the specific application or not? The text doesn't fully resolve that ambiguity.
The Key of Solomon offers this demanding, complex, utterly fascinating glimpse into historical occultism, one that requires not just belief, but this unwavering precision in execution, operated within a framework that attempts to map and control the unseen world through both divine authority and meticulously crafted ritual technology.
A truly deep dive into a world filled with power, paradox, and enduring mystery.